What would you do if the secret of your pregnancy was revealed in the worst possible way? It was supposed to be a perfect night. I prepared Ethan's favorite dinner, hoping to finally earn his mother's approval after weeks of tension. But when my mother-in-law whispered something into his ear, I saw his face shift from calm to furious in an instant. And then, in a moment of pure shock, he slapped me, his pregnant wife, before he even understood what was happening. The shock, the tears, and the overwhelming nausea hit me all at once. Could I ever trust him again? Could I ever forgive him? More importantly, could I stay with someone who had hurt me and our baby like this? I still recall the sound of my mother-in-law's heels clicking against the hardwood floor as she walked toward Ethan. The aroma of the lasagna I had spent hours preparing filled the air, and I was hoping, desperately hoping, that tonight I would finally earn her approval. My stomach was in knots. Morning sickness had hit me hard at 6 weeks, but I hadn't told anyone yet about the pregnancy. Then, everything shifted. Vivian, my mother-in-law, placed her hand on Ethan's shoulder and leaned in, whispering something in his ear. I watched in real time as his face shifted from calm to furious in a matter of seconds. The warm brown eyes I had once fallen in love with turned cold, and he turned his gaze on me. "Is this true?" he demanded, his voice full of accusation. He stood so abruptly that his chair scraped loudly against the floor. "Have you been lying to me?" Before I could even respond, his hand shot out. The slap was so hard, so sudden, that I lost my balance, stumbling back into the wall. My cheek burned, and the room seemed to spin around me as tears welled up in my eyes. And then it happened, the wave I'd been holding back all evening, the one I couldn't control anymore. In front of both of them, I threw up. Ethan took a step back, visibly disgusted, but froze when he noticed something in my purse that had fallen open on the floor. A positive pregnancy test had slipped out. His face drained of color as he looked from the test to me. "Grace, are you—" His voice trailed off, the words unable to form. I reached up to touch my stinging cheek, tears streaming down my face. "Yes," I whispered. "I'm pregnant. I was going to tell you tonight. That's why I made your favorite dinner." The silence that followed was suffocating. Ethan stared at the pregnancy test, then at his hand, the one he had just used to strike his pregnant wife. Vivian stood frozen, her perfectly painted lips pressed into a thin line, but even she couldn't hide the shock in her eyes. "Oh my God," Ethan muttered, his voice trembling. "Grace, I... He reached for me, but I flinched away, my body instinctively retreating. The man who had promised to love and protect me had just hit me while I was carrying his child. In that moment, as I watched Ethan wrestle with the horror of what he had just done, it hit me our lives would never be the same. The secret I had wanted to share with Joy had been revealed in the worst way possible. And now, I had to decide. Could I ever trust him again? Could I forgive him? More importantly, could I stay with someone who had shown that he might hurt me and our baby? The sound of a door creaking open startled all of us. Chloe, our next-door neighbor, stood in the doorway, concern written all over her face. "I heard shouting," she said, taking in the scene, my red cheek, Ethan's guilty expression, Vivian's tense posture. "Is everything okay?" I knew, deep down, that nothing was okay, and that nothing would be for a long time. I remember the day I met Ethan as though it was yesterday. It was a Friday afternoon at Carter's coffee shop in downtown Austin. I had been grading papers. Being a third-grade teacher meant that my weekends began with a stack of math worksheets and creative writing assignments. Ethan accidentally spilled his coffee on my students' homework, and his frantic attempts to salvage the papers made me laugh. "I promise I'm not usually this clumsy," he said, desperately dabbing at the papers with napkins. "Please let me make it up to you. Coffee or maybe dinner." That's how it started. Simple, sweet, and completely perfect. Ethan was everything I dreamed of. Successful but humble, funny but responsible. And he looked at me like I was the most fascinating person he'd ever met. Our first year of marriage was beautiful. We bought a small house with a backyard, talked about having kids someday, and spent weekends making plans for our future. Then Vivian moved in. "It's just temporary, honey," Ethan assured me. "Mom's having a hard time with the divorce. She needs support right now." I wanted to be understanding. I did. But Vivian had a way of making me feel small in my own home. Nothing I did was ever good enough. The house wasn't clean enough. My cooking wasn't up to her standards. And apparently, I wasn't taking good enough care of her precious son. "Ethan works so hard," she'd say, watching me pack his lunch. "He needs more protein than that," when I was taking care of him. The changes and Ethan were subtle at first. He started criticizing things he'd never noticed before, the way I folded his shirts, the food I cooked, how much time I spent talking to my sister on the phone. Each criticism was preceded by those private, whispered conversations with his mother, and together they were made public. When I found out I was pregnant 3 weeks ago, I should have been overjoyed. Instead, I felt terrified. I hid the morning sickness, making excuses to rush to the bathroom at school. I kept crackers in my desk drawer and blamed my fatigue on end-of-semester stress. I wanted to tell Ethan first, to have just one moment of joy between us before Vivian took over with her opinions on how I should handle my pregnancy. The night of the slap, I'd finally worked up the courage. I'd planned everything perfectly. Ethan's favorite lasagna, his preferred wine, which I wouldn't be drinking, and even bought a little onesie to surprise him with. But Vivian insisted on coming to dinner. "Family dinners are important," she said, inviting herself. I was in the kitchen layering the pasta when I overheard Vivian on the phone. "She's hiding something. I know it. I saw her running to the bathroom at odd hours. Probably having an affair. My Ethan deserves better than that." My hands shook as I placed the lasagna in the oven. An affair? Is that what she whispered to Ethan at dinner? Is that why he was so quick to believe the worst about me? Standing in our dining room now with Chloe witnessing the aftermath of what just happened, I felt the weight of every wrong assumption, every whispered lie, every moment I stayed quiet to keep the peace. My hand moved protectively to my stomach. The baby inside me deserved better than this. I deserved better than this. "Grace." Ethan stepped toward me again, his voice breaking. "Please let me explain." But Chloe had already wrapped her arm around my shoulders. "She's coming with me," she said firmly, "and you better not try to stop her." As Chloe led me out of the house, I heard Vivian's voice behind us. "Ethan, darling, she's hysterical. You know how women get in her condition." The door closed behind us, muffling Vivian's words, but the damage was already done. My perfect life had shattered in a single evening, and I had no idea how to pick up the pieces. The next few days at Chloe's house were a blur of tears, nausea, and endless calls from Ethan that I let go to voicemail. Chloe, bless her heart, took care of everything. She went back to my house to get my clothes, called the school to request my sick days, and held my hair back during morning sickness. "Your house isn't a home anymore, Grace," Chloe said one morning, pushing a cup of ginger tea across her kitchen table. "I've watched things get worse over the past 6 months. We all have." I wrapped my hands around the warm mug, remembering how things had changed since Vivian moved in. It started with small things. She'd rearrange my kitchen while I was at work, claiming she was helping. She'd make comments about my weight, saying she was concerned about my health. But it was her influence on Ethan that hurt the most. "Remember last month?" Chloe asked gently. "When Ethan skipped your sister's wedding because Vivian said she was feeling too anxious to be alone?" I nodded, feeling the familiar ache in my chest. He didn't even question it, just called my sister and made excuses, while Vivian smirked behind his back. The constant calls and texts from Ethan played like a broken record. "I'm so sorry. Please come home. I'll make it right. I never meant to hurt you." But mixed in with his messages were Vivian's. "You're tearing this family apart. Ethan is devastated because of your dramatics. A good wife would come home and work things out." 1 week after the incident, I had my first prenatal appointment. Chloe came with me, holding my hand as the doctor confirmed I was 6 weeks along. The sound of my baby's heartbeat filled the room, strong and steady. Tears rolled down my cheeks, tears of joy mixed with sadness because Ethan should have been here for this moment. I had always imagined this moment sharing it with my husband and Lily, together. "Do you want me to record it?" Chloe whispered. I nodded, unable to speak. That evening, I sat on Chloe's guest bed staring at my phone. I had promised myself I wouldn't reach out to Ethan, but hearing our baby's heartbeat changed something inside me. With trembling hands, I sent him the recording with a simple message, "Your child's heartbeat." His response came quickly. "Please, can we talk in person?" "Without Mom." I glanced at my reflection in Chloe's guest room mirror. The bruise on my cheek had faded to a sickly yellowish green, but the fear in my eyes was still fresh. Could I face him? Should I? My phone buzzed again. This time, it was Vivian. "How dare you send that to him without discussing it with me first? I'm his mother. I should be involved in these decisions." Something snapped within me. 3 years of keeping quiet, of trying to please her, of watching my husband slowly become her puppet, it all boiled over. I typed the words I'd been holding back for so long. "You are not involved in decisions about my baby. Never have been, never will be." I blocked her number before she could respond. A few moments later, Ethan called. This time, I picked up. "She's gone too far," he said. Before I could speak, I heard Vivian on the phone with her friends bragging about how she'd saved me from his supposed affair. "She made it all up, Grace, and God, I believed her. I hit you because I believed her lies." His voice cracked. I could hear him crying. "I need you to choose, Ethan," I said, my voice stronger than I felt. "Either your mother moves out, or I'm not coming back. And if I don't come back, I'll be talking to a lawyer about full custody. I won't raise our child in a home with violence." The silence on the other end felt like it stretched for hours, and for a moment, I thought he had hung up. Finally, he spoke. "Can you meet me tomorrow at Carter's coffee shop where we first met? Mom won't be there, I promise. I need to see you." I looked down at my stomach, still flat but carrying our future. "Okay," I whispered. "Tomorrow at 2 o'clock. But Ethan, if she shows up, I'm done. Forever." "She won't," he said, his voice firm. "I'm choosing you, Grace. I should have chosen you all along." As I ended the call, I wasn't sure if I believed him, but for the sake of our baby, I had to try. I stood up, leaving my seat beside Chloe, and made my way to Carter's coffee shop. I arrived 15 minutes early, my heart pounding in my chest. The familiar smell of coffee beans, which had once comforted me, now made my stomach churn. I chose a table near the door, an easy escape route if things went wrong. Chloe was parked across the street, ready to intervene if needed. At exactly 2 o'clock, the bell above the door chimed. Ethan walked in alone, just as promised. He looked terrible unshaven, dark circles under his eyes, wearing the same blue button-down shirt he had worn the night of the incident. My body tensed as he approached, but he stopped a few feet from the table, respecting my space. "Can I sit?" he asked softly. I nodded, watching as he sank into the chair across from me, his eyes fixed on my stomach, then darted away guiltily. "I kicked her out," he said without preamble. "Last night, she's staying at a hotel." I wrapped my hands around my untouched tea. "Just like that?" "No," he admitted. "She screamed, cried, and told me I was abandoning her, said I was choosing He swallowed hard. "I can't even repeat what she called you, but I packed her bags myself, told her if she didn't leave, I'd call the police." A couple at the next table glanced our way. I lowered my voice. "Why now, Ethan? Why not after all the other times she hurt me?" "Because I became her." His voice cracked. "When I hit you, I became everything I hated about her. Controlling, violent, ready to believe the worst." He wiped his eyes roughly. The sound of your head hitting the wall keeps playing in my mind, and then seeing that pregnancy test? He choked back a sob. The barista called out someone's order, making me jump. Ethan noticed and flinched at my reaction. I'm scared of you, I admitted quietly. Do you understand that? I'm carrying your child, and I'm scared of you. You should be, he whispered. What I did, there's no excuse. But Grace, please believe me, it will never happen again. I'm starting therapy tomorrow. I've already had my first consultation. I need to understand why I let her control me, why I became this person I don't recognize. I took a shaky breath. I have conditions, Ethan, non-negotiable ones. He leaned forward. Anything. Vivian never sets foot in our house again. No holidays, no visits, nothing. She gets no information about the baby, no photos, no updates, nothing. Done, he said immediately. You continue therapy. We also do couples counseling. And if you ever raise a hand to me again, I'm gone. No discussions, no second chances. I'll press charges and file for full custody. Her fingers clenched into a fist. I understand. He reached for his phone, pulling up an email. I've already found a couples counselor. And he slid a business card across the table. This is my lawyer. I've asked her to draw up papers giving you full custody if I ever become violent again. One incident, that's all it would take. The papers are being prepared now. My hand trembled as I picked up the card. You're serious about this? I love you, Grace. I love our baby, and I hate myself for what I did. He looked down at his hands. When I heard that heartbeat, I realized I was becoming the kind of father I never wanted to be, the kind that makes their child afraid. The silence between us was heavy with unspoken fears and hopes. Finally, I spoke. I'm not coming home today, I said. I need time, and we start couples counseling first. He nodded, relief visible on his face. Would it be okay if I came to the next doctor's appointment? For the first time since that horrible night, I felt a tiny spark of hope. Yes, I said, but Chloe comes too. Of course, he agreed quickly. Whatever you need to feel safe. As we sat there, the afternoon light streaming through the coffee shop windows, I realized we were at a crossroads. The path forward would be hard, filled with counseling sessions and rebuilding trust. But at least now there was a path. The next 2 weeks were a strange dance of careful boundaries and small steps forward. Ethan attended his therapy sessions twice a week, sending me photos of his check-ins at the therapist's office. Dr. Martinez, our couples counselor, helped us start rebuilding mainly through supervised sessions where we learned to communicate without Vivian's toxic influence. But Vivian wasn't going quietly. Ethan, your mother's outside my classroom again, I texted him one Tuesday morning. Through the window, I could see her sitting in her silver Mercedes, watching the school entrance. My third graders were at recess, but my hands shook as I typed. His response was immediate. Don't move. I'm calling the police. 15 minutes later, I watched through my classroom window as 2 police officers approached Vivian's car. She played the perfect victim. Tears, trembling hands, just a concerned mother worried about her son's marriage. But when they told her to leave, her mask slipped. She's poisoning my son against me, she screamed, loud enough that I could hear her through the closed windows. She trapped him with that baby. My classroom aide, Ashley, placed a protective hand on my shoulder. Want me to film this? She whispered. Might be useful for that restraining order you mentioned. I nodded, grateful for her quick thinking. That evening during our counseling session, Ethan broke down when I showed him the video. I never saw it before, he said, his voice hollow. How she really is. She acted exactly like she did when Dad left, screaming, making accusations, playing the victim. And He looked at Dr. Martinez. I always believed her version of everything. The generational pattern of abuse is strong. Dr. Martinez said gently, her tone calm yet firm. But Ethan, you're breaking it. Every time you choose Grace and your child over your mother's manipulation, you're breaking it. Later that week, we had another prenatal appointment. Chloe drove me there with Ethan following in his car, a new safety measure we'd put in place. The ultrasound technician guided us through the scan, and for the first time since that night, Ethan reached out and took my hand. I let him. "Would you like to know the gender?" the technician asked, her voice warm. Ethan looked at me, silently asking for permission. I nodded. "It's a girl," the technician smiled, pointing to our baby's tiny form on the screen. "A girl," I whispered, placing my free hand on my stomach protectively. Looking at Ethan, I could see the same thought in his eyes. Our daughter would never know the fear of living in a home where love was conditional, where manipulation and violence had been the norm. That evening, as Chloe and I were leaving the clinic, we found Vivian waiting in the parking lot. Before I could react, Ethan stepped between us, his body a barrier. "Leave," he said, his voice cold but resolute. "Now, or I'm calling the police again." "I have a right to know about my granddaughter." Vivian's voice rose, laced with hysteria. She must have been eavesdropping through the clinic walls. "No, you don't," Ethan replied, his tone firm like steel. "You lost that right the moment you made me hurt her mother." Vivian's face twisted with fury. "I never made you do anything. She's turning you against me just like your father." "Security is on their way," Chloe interrupted, holding up her phone. "They've been instructed to call the police immediately if you don't leave." Vivian's eyes flashed with rage, but she finally backed away toward her car. "This isn't over," she shouted. "That's my grandbaby." As Vivian retreated, Chloe turned to me with a reassuring smile, but my chest felt heavy. That night in Chloe's guest room, I finally allowed myself to break down. Ethan sat just outside the door. We weren't quite ready for him to stay the night yet, but he refused to leave me alone after Vivian's outburst. "I've filed for the restraining order," he said softly through the door. "For all three of us, you, me, and the baby. My lawyer says with the school video and the clinic incident, we'll get it." I pressed my hand against the door, feeling his presence on the other side, mirroring my gesture. "I'm sorry," he whispered, his voice raw. "For everything I put you through, for every time I didn't protect you, for every time I chose her over you." "I know," I said softly, "but Ethan, I need you to understand something. I'm not doing this for us. I'm doing it for her." I touched my growing belly. "She deserves better than what we had." "Yes," he agreed. "She does, and I swear, Grace, she'll have it. We'll give her everything we never had. Safety, trust, love without condition." For the first time in weeks, I believed him. The restraining order came through a week later. 3 months, renewable based on behavior. Seeing it in writing, Vivian Matthews must maintain a distance of at least 500 feet, made it real. We were doing this. Ethan and I continued our separate therapy sessions, meeting twice a week with Dr. Martinez for couples counseling. Slowly, painfully, we began to unpack years of manipulation and control. "Tell me about the first time you noticed Vivian's influence changing your behavior," Dr. Martinez asked Ethan during one session. He rubbed his face, thinking. 2 months after our wedding, Grace made this beautiful birthday dinner for me, but Mom had already surprised me with lunch. She knew about the dinner, Grace had told her. When I got home, she started saying how worried she was about Grace wasting money on expensive ingredients when she'd already fed me. "And what did you do?" Dr. Martinez prompted. "I dot." He looked at me, shame in his eyes. "I complained about the dinner, said we needed to be more careful with money. Grace had spent her teaching salary on those ingredients. Grace complained a lot, and I began to agree with her that David was not the type to make poor decisions like this. I remember that night. I'd thrown the whole meal away crying in the kitchen while Ethan and Vivian watched TV in the living room. The old patterns run deep," Dr. Martinez explained. but recognition is the first step to change. By my 5th month, we felt ready for me to move back home. Chloe helped me pack, still unsure. "Are you certain about this?" she asked, folding my maternity clothes. "No," I admitted, "but I need to try, for her." I touched my growing belly. The house felt different when I returned. Vivian's things were gone. Her photos, her decorative plates, her passive-aggressive sticky notes about cleaning. Ethan had repainted the walls in soft yellows and greens, colors we chose together for the nursery. "I got rid of the dining room set," he said quietly. "Bought a new one. I didn't want you to have to look at that table every day." The new table was round, warm oak instead of Vivian's formal mahogany. No hierarchy, no head of the table where she used to hold court. Instead, we developed new routines. Ethan would text before coming home, giving me time to prepare for his arrival. We cooked together, instead of letting me handle all the meals. Every decision about the baby was made jointly with no outside input. The first test came at 7 months. Vivian sent a baby gift to my school, an expensive silver rattle with a note claiming that family heirlooms can't be kept away by restraining orders. Ethan took it straight to our lawyer. "She's testing boundaries," he said, making sure we know she's still watching. The rattle was returned through legal channels with a warning about violating the restraining order. That night, Ethan held me as I cried. "What if she never stops?" I whispered. "What if our daughter has to grow up looking over her shoulder?" "Then we'll protect her," he said firmly. "Every day, every time. I won't fail her like I failed you." Dr. Martinez helped us make a safety plan. Passwords for daycare pickup, security cameras for the house, a list of protected contacts who could help in emergencies. As my due date approached, we faced another challenge, the hospital birth plan. Vivian had somehow discovered which hospital I'd registered at. "We need to change hospitals," Ethan said, showing me the message his mother had sent through his cousin. "She's already trying to get information from the maternity ward." So we switched, registered under Chloe's address, and made sure every hospital staff member knew about the restraining order. It felt extreme, but seeing Ethan take these steps to protect us helped rebuild my trust in him. "You're doing the work, Doctor," Martinez said in one of our last sessions before my due date. "Both of you. That's what matters." Looking around our reformed home, at the nursery we'd built together, at the man Ethan was becoming without his mother's influence, I finally felt something I hadn't in months. Peace. Labor started at 2 a.m. on a quiet Tuesday. Ethan called Chloe first, then followed our practiced plan. Hospital bag, car seat ready, security cameras checked, no signs of Vivian's Mercedes anywhere near our home. The delivery room was calm, nothing like the chaos I'd feared. Ethan stayed by my head, holding my hand and whispering encouragement. Chloe guarded the door, our self-appointed sentinel. After 12 hours of labor, our daughter, Lily Grace, entered the world, screaming her little lungs out. "She is perfect," Ethan whispered, tears streaming down his face. "She looks just like you." As I held Lily for the first time, I studied her tiny features, my dark hair, Ethan's nose, 10 perfect fingers and toes. She was everything we'd fought for, everything we'd protected. The first test came sooner than we anticipated. A flower delivery arrived at the hospital, addressed to "My first granddaughter Lily." Ethan intercepted it before it reached our room. The card read, "Blood is thicker than water. She'll need her grandmother soon enough." Instead of hiding it from me, Ethan showed me the card. "No more secrets," he said firmly, ripping it up in front of me. "We handle everything together now." The hospital security doubled their rounds. Chloe's partner, Tom, a police officer, volunteered to stay outside our door during the night shift. We were surrounded by protection people who understood our need for safety and peace. Coming home wasn't anything like I'd imagined during my pregnancy. Ethan had installed new security cameras, changed all the locks, and added extra lighting around the house. But inside it was just us, our little family of 3. Welcome home, Lily, I whispered softly as I carried her into the nursery we had created together. The room was a sanctuary painted in soft colors, filled with books and stuffed animals we had both carefully chosen. The first few weeks blurred together with midnight feedings and endless diaper changes. Ethan had taken extended paternity leave, showing his commitment to being present every step of the way. We were crafting our parenting style, free from Vivian's critical voice and manipulation. At Lily's 1-month checkup, our pediatrician smiled warmly at us. "She's thriving," she said. "Whatever you're doing, keep doing it." That evening, as we sat in the nursery with Lily peacefully asleep in her crib, Ethan took my hand. "I saw Mom today," he said quietly. "At the grocery store. I was picking up more diapers." My heart stopped. "What happened?" "She tried to approach me, asked about Lily," he said, squeezing my hand. I walked away, called security, followed our plan. I released the breath I had been holding. "And how do you feel?" "Sad," he admitted, his voice heavy, "but certain. Our daughter will never know that kind of love, the kind that hurts, the kind that controls. She'll only know the real thing." I looked down at our daughter, sleeping soundly in her crib, and knew he was right. The cycle was broken. Our home was filled with a different kind of love now, the kind that protected instead of controlled, the kind that built up instead of tearing down. Lily stirred in her sleep, making the tiny baby noises that melted our hearts. Ethan and I sat there, hands still linked, watching her. "Thank you," he whispered. "For what?" I asked, my voice soft. "For giving me a second chance. For showing me what a real family looks like." For her, I leaned against his shoulder, feeling truly safe for the first time in years. "We did it together," I said quietly, "and we'll keep doing it. Every day." For her outside, the sun was setting on another day in our new life, a life we had fought for, a life we would continue to protect, a life where our daughter would grow up knowing only love and never fear, and that made every struggle, every tear, every difficult decision worth it. So, with everything that's happened, can I truly trust and go back to Ethan? Can he change to become the husband I've always hoped for, or is this just a wound that can never heal? From a logical and analytical perspective, this relationship is facing a huge challenge. Ethan's actions were not a one-time accident, but rather the result of a long chain of events, especially the influence from his mother. The controlling behavior and patterns built over time will not change overnight, no matter how many promises he makes. In this case, Ethan may feel guilty and want to make things right, but that doesn't mean change will happen instantly. Changing behavior, especially when it's been heavily influenced by family dynamics, is a long process that requires patience. He'll have to prove himself through actions, not just words. However, the most important factor is the trust between them. Can Grace accept starting over, knowing that Ethan has hurt her and that the wound can't be completely erased? This is a question that will take time to answer. This story also emphasizes that every relationship needs respect and mutual protection. No one can change unless they fully acknowledge their mistakes and take concrete steps to fix them. What do you think about forgiving and giving a chance to change after being hurt? Is change a process or just empty promises? Share your thoughts.